Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and this is the Daily Brief. So the last few days have ticked up in the number of Russians eliminated on the battlefield: 1,096, 11 tanks, 20 armored combat vehicles, 43 artillery pieces, 46 of vehicles and fuel tanks. So this is, if you go back and just within the last week, you'll see a range from 700 and change to 1,100 or so, and it's on the higher end right now. Andrew Perpetua tracks all this, and it's just about 2-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses that he could tabulate. Okay, invaders inflict more than 500 strikes on Zaporizhia region over the past 24 hours. That's kind of a lot for one region within the country. The Russian occupation forces inflicted more than 500 strikes on Zaporizhia region over the past 24 hours, causing housing destruction. Head of Zaporizhia Region Military Administration has said on Saturday morning. Yeah, the Russians tend to, well, this is like shelling, not just missiles or that kind of thing, but they tend to do this. The Russian army attacked Mykolaiv with kamikaze drones. Hotel buildings and cars were damaged. I just can't understand how the Russians are spending their valuable ammunition, their valuable missiles attacking a hotel when they should be attacking a military formation or a plane or something along those lines. Okay. The U.S. is rushing to get new Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine before Russia can destroy more targets. They're really working at this, but until they get that, the Russians have a certain advantage that we'll talk about in just a moment. In the meantime, the Ukrainians are trying to inflict what damage they can on legitimate Russian military targets. Russian telegram channels report the Ukrainian military attacked Russian air defense at Cape Tarkhankut overnight, allegedly with ATACMS missiles. Please forgive me, this is down in Crimea. Crimea has the Tatar-based language, and so I could be wildly off on the pronunciation here. In addition, a powerful explosion is reported in Dzhankoi. Somebody told me about this. The Dzhankoi is Dzhankoi because that's based on that Tartar whatever, and I could be wildly off. They could have been lying to me, but this is the guidance they gave me. According to Suspline, more than 10,000 explosions sounded around 1 a.m. In Dzhankoi in northern Crimea. There's no official information on the strike yet, but that'll come out. In fact, I'm going to show you the aftermath of a strike from about 4 or 5 days ago. Okay. Ukraine struck Russian air defenses with ATACMS on the western tip. This is, by the way, where it is, Cape Tarkhankut. Okay. This operation would be a precursor to more strikes on military targets further east. I wonder what's further east. Well, it looks like if they can reach down here, how much more is it to get down here? All right, let's keep looking at this. It was loud also in Bryansk region overnight. Ukrainian drones reportedly hit a substation there. And then Ukraine will be, this is from the ISW, Ukraine will be able to stabilize front lines in coming months, according to the Institute for the Study of War. In the meantime, until like the United States and other Western partners are rushing aid to Ukraine, trying to make sure that they have the shells that they need and other things along these lines to be able to carry on the fight. Until they stabilize, it's a little tricky, but after that, it should be very stable for some time. According to the ISW analyst, Russian forces will still suffer from widespread tactical failures, and Ukrainian forces will still be able to exploit those failures as long as the Russian military command continues to struggle with internalizing and disseminating adaptations at the tactical level. That means on a smaller, short-term kind of level, rather than strategic, long-term. Ukraine will be able to neutralize many of the material constraints it currently faces in the coming weeks. That's what we're just talking about. Right now, they're kind of up against the wall. In the coming weeks, and taking steps to alleviate its manpower challenges in the coming months. So they have to really focus on dealing with the mobilization, recruitment, that kind of thing internally, and there's not a lot that outside partners can do with that. Okay, next article. So I found this to be really, really interesting. Every year on Victory Day, the Russians will parade through the streets, and they'll have this big parade where they'll show off all their military armament, the tanks and the rocket missile launchers and a nuclear missile and whatever else. And then they'll also have a parade of people walking through the streets, and they'll be holding photos. So this is a really interesting psychological thing. It's um, any family member that you have, this is called the Immortal Regiment, that fought in World War II. If you have a picture of that family member, you walk through the streets with that person. That person who's walking is identifying with that, and it's really interesting psychologically. Well, last year, some of these were canceled due to security concerns. Remember, they had been able to have a drone pass over the Kremlin and some other things that were making it a little nerve-wracking for Russia. Well, it's canceled again this year as well. Russia's Immortal Regiment March, due to take place on 9 May 2024, has been canceled according to the British Ministry of Defense. During the march, family members would usually display photographs of deceased veterans of the Second World War, which, of course, they call something different than the Second World War, right? It's the Great Patriotic War. Associated with Victory Day, instead, portraits may be displayed in cars and public locations between 1 and 11 May. Like, that's a pretty lame substitute for actually having the march, and it won't tie people physically or psychologically to their relatives and Mother Russia nearly as well as what it was before. According to Medusa News, Victory Day parades in 5 Russian regions have also been canceled, with security concerns cited. These include Bryansk, Pskov, Ryazan, Kursk, and Belgorod. The regions listed are all in western Russia and are therefore likely vulnerable to Ukrainian uncrewed aerial vehicles, UAV, strikes. During the run-up to last year's Victory Day parade, there was a UAV attack on the Kremlin, which I was just talking about. This is the second year in a row that the Immortal Regiment March has been canceled and victory parades curtailed on security grounds, which is interesting because it's just a special operation, nothing to see here. In fact, if you say war, that's bad, you can go to jail. This year, President Putin's inauguration precedes Victory Day, taking place on 7 May. The potential for protests and discontent over the Ukraine war are also likely to have influenced the calculus of the Russian leadership. Of course it has. I mean, there's no denying that it has. Okay, last little bit. Jay in Kiev posted this. I'm going to show you 2 more things. Jay in Kiev posted this. Russia only controls 2% of the Baltic Sea, yet we allow them to treat it like it's their own personal lake. Blockade Kaliningrad, close the Gulf to Finland, and kick the Russian savages out of Kaliningrad. Now, let's look at the map here. Russia doesn't have a lot of way to access the West. There's really 2 places, the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Now Finland is part of NATO, Sweden's part of NATO, Estonia already was, and they have to pass through this. Or Kaliningrad to get out, Poland and Lithuania are both part of NATO. So it's really interesting, but they act like they own the joint rather than that they're all partners, all working together or having to live together here as neighbors. Now, the other place that Russia has access to the West is through the Black Sea. So here's Ukraine, and here's part of Russia that has, so they've had this port here at Sevastopol, but now they've had to flee to hug the Russian coast. And so really they have 1, 2, and they have Arctic access sometimes, maybe through subs or something when it's warm enough or whatever. But wow, Russia could theoretically be largely cut off pretty easily from access to Western ports. Anyway, just a thought. Last little bit, I talked about this earlier, aftermath of a drone attack on Rosneft oil depot in Smolensk. So here's the before and after. This was just 4 days ago. Just because I reported on it, I thought, hey, let's do the follow-up. Okay, that's all that I have. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.